Are we ready to start then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, item 1 then is apologies. I've already got Phil Butters and Sylvia Dymond. Is there anybody else? Or I think we're all here, aren't we?
Think so.
I've just got those two, Chair.
Yeah, okay, fine. Does any item 2 then? Any declarations of interest from anybody?
No.
No.
Okay.
Item 3 then, the minutes of the previous meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read those?
Yeah.
Yep.
There is one item that relates to those, and that is a briefing note being distributed about the Brexit preparedness, which was one of the things that we discussed at the last meeting. I think it was Mike who was interested in it. It had been taken off the original audit list, and so we agreed that we'd get an update on it, and then we could potentially look at it in the June meeting. Has everybody received that briefing note? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Has anybody got any issues with the minutes, or are they okay as they stand?
Okay, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Everybody okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, all agreed.
Okay. Thanks. Right then. Item 4 then. The internal audit plan. There are a number of documents to go with this. If Jan wants to give us a brief intro on it, and then perhaps we can move through those documents.
Yes, actually, Chair, I think Claire might be better placed to introduce this item, seeing as she prepared the plan and the report. So
Yeah, you're right. Her name's at the top of it. Sorry, Claire.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the internal audit plan for 2021. So it was prepared before the current emergency situation. I think that's the most important point to point out. There might need to be some revision to it as we sort of, see how things pan out in terms of the current situation. I think that the two key risk areas for us are, number one, that we can't access the people we need to talk to do our audit work. And also the risk assessment might change because, as the council moves through this emergency situation, things that we've perhaps not considered in terms of audit work before might mean that we need to do those as a high risk areas, and some of the things on the plan might need to come off maybe. So I think what I'd just say at this stage is, I'll say it's a plan based on, before the world changed. So I'm happy to go through it all in detail. I have got a risk section in there that talks about potentially that we might need to change the plan. But I think what I'd like to do is obviously go through the plan with you as it sits now, and then perhaps when we do the quarterly updates, I can update you then in terms of how we've had to flex the plan. That's hopefully what we'll do. So in terms of the recommendations then, so the committee has asked to approve the internal audit plan, and approve the internal audit charter as well, and then agree to have those quarterly reports. And as I say, as we produce those quarterly reports, any things we need to do to change the plan, we'll do at that stage. So just in terms of a bit of background then and how the plan was pulled together, if you turn to page 10, if everybody's got the agendas in front of them. So paragraph 2.1, just talk there about the fact that this is a plan produced by Stoke-on-Trent City Council. So this will be the first year that we're undertaking full internal audit service for Newcastle, and I will continue with the role of Chief Internal Auditor as defined by the standards. So that's obviously a change from the previous year where you had your internal audit team were in Newcastle and we were just providing that support for them. So in terms of how the plan has been pulled together, we've done a risk assessment. Sorry, can you still see me? My screen's changed. Can everybody still hear me?
Yeah.
Somebody was sharing it.
Sorry, my screen changed and it went all funny. So the plan has been pulled together on a risk-based approach, which is how we've approached it in the last couple of years. So that work all feeds in, as you know, to an annual opinion that we do that feeds into the annual governance statement. In terms of how that risk assessment has been pulled together, so we consider emerging issues as they are at the time. This plan was produced sort of beginning of March time, so say I know the world has moved on a lot since then, but what we knew at that point in time at the beginning of March has been considered. We also did some work talking to the executive directors to make sure we got their views in terms of risk on the plan as well. And as you may remember, during 1920, we had a number of audits that were deferred due to some special investigations that the team were undertaking at the time. So we've, again, risk assessed all those deferred items, and any that need to go on the plan have been included. So over on page 11, 2.9, again, just to say that, you know, we will be reviewing the plan and bringing quarterly updates to the committee. And as I mentioned, we'll make sure that any changes that need to be made to the plan as a result of, you know, the emerging situation, that we consider those during those quarterly updates. At 3.1, just a bit of detail around IT audit. So previously that was provided by an external provider. What we're planning to do this year is include that with the City Council, Stoke City Council's IT audit work. So what we're planning to do is a needs assessment of the IT work that needs to be done during the year, and we'll then feed that into the plan once that assessment's been completed. So over on page 13, just got some details about the resources. So in the past, we'd have said how many days there and who was completing what bits of work. But because this time the plan has been provided through a service level agreement, what we've done is we've kept the number of days consistent with the plan as it was in previous years, and we've allocated the work as detailed in section 9.3 there. So around proactive assurance, any assurance that needs to go to external stakeholders, for example, advice and support, all those kind of things. As I previously mentioned, there's a section on risk around risk to the plan, because either we can't get hold of people to conduct the audit work that we want to do, or because of, say, they need to change that risk assessment as things move on. So over on page 14, you've got details of the appendices. So the first appendix is the internal audit plan itself, which starts on page 15. Which details all the audits we'll undertake and how many days we're planning for each of those pieces of work, split by service area. And then at Appendix B, you've got the internal audit charter. Now this is basically the same charter that you had last year. We've just amended it slightly to reflect the revised situation with the internal audit service now being provided fully by Stoke City Council. So just minor changes to that, but just again, so you've got that for your information. The internal audit charter sets out how the internal audit team work, how we conduct our audits, how we report. So you just got details of that. Quick run through. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
So if anybody wishes to ask a question, then if you click on the hand button, then that'll put your hand up, and then I can invite you to ask your questions. I'll just go back to that. I can't see the two things simultaneously, so I have to swap between them. We'll get there eventually. Right, I've got Sarah. Sarah, would you like to ask your question?
I'm just, given what you just said about this was written on the 20th of March, did you say, or early in March?
It was, yeah, around the beginning of March we pulled the plan together.
How relevant is it then to the current situation? Are you not going to have to revise it in total? I'm just a bit bemused why we're discussing it, really, if it's not actually going to happen, is it? I know you've got to have some sort of plan, but
yeah,
how much is going to be revised? Do you know?
I say at this stage, because we don't know what's going to happen in terms of when lockdown is going to be lifted, you know, all those kind of things are up in the air at the minute, aren't they, in terms of, you know, we are planning that we will start some of the work in the plan, you know, via these distant communication routes if we can. Obviously, it's the first year we've ever done some audit work directly for you. That is going to make that a little bit harder. Obviously, some of our audit work does require face-to-face contact, you know, where we're observing processes and things like that. So at this stage, I don't think we've got a better plan than the one we've got at the minute, is what I would say to you. But what I will do is make sure that we keep that plan under review, and we make sure that when we are making changes to it, we report that to you as part of the quarterly updates.
Can I just ask? Yeah. Sorry, can I just ask then? What about? I can't see it on here. Under resources and support services, you've got payroll, purchase to pay. But what about our reserves? As I'm really concerned with what's going on at the moment. That you've used some of the reserves already. How much government money have we had in? How much time is Audit going to spend looking at that and making sure that we're not getting to a section 114 position?
Okay. Under the corporate section, you've got a section there called financial resilience. So that would be where we would look at things like level of reserves, things like
So
that.
it's down there, sorry,
That.
right, okay.
Yeah, it's
That's
under
fine.
that section. As you can
Yeah.
see, we've given that 20 days, so I think we already thought that was an important piece of work to conduct. So yeah, that is on the plan, and we'll look at that.
Great, okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike, I've got you down.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah, it's all right. I've just unmuted him, I think.
Oh.
No. Yeah.
No.
No, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Very similar concerns to Sarah, and I don't want to sort of repeat the record, but how can we be asked to approve a schedule that genuinely nobody knows what's going to happen over the next 3, 6, even 9 months? I think the thought that, well, this is the best available at the moment, that ties us to something that might be completely out of date tomorrow. It also asks us to approve something that has no fiscal value. If you look at the resources, there's no cost. So it's almost giving carte blanche that we just accept whatever our partner charges us, and that doesn't seem right. I think going forward, very much like Sarah said, a huge piece of work will need to be done, and that's not to downplay anything else. And I think generally in a normal time I wouldn't have a problem with the plan, but it's not a normal time, and the biggest thing that's going to affect all local government, whether it's Newcastle, Stoke, Staffordshire, whatever, is the finances. How close, we don't know, and perhaps that's a good thing, how close we were to having to get the, I think, Sarah said the section notice. We don't know how close we were the first time. We have no idea how, even from our own portfolio holders report, and I thank Stephen for that, because it was great, it was truthful, it was exactly what we needed. But it also said in 3 months' time, we're going to be in a position where we don't know whether or not we'll have to have a section notice put out. So I'm very uncomfortable agreeing to a plan that doesn't act. The plan was written before what we've got now. I don't know legally if we can defer it, but I would like us to defer this decision purely on the fact that we do not know what the audit plan will have to look like in the next 3, 6, 9 months. If there are statutory things that we need to do, I'm happy to sign them off, and that's absolutely fine. But I think things that aren't, we should not be agreeing, especially with no cost to anything, really. Thank you, Chair.
Jan, would you like to come in?
Yeah, so I think I can provide a bit of reassurance in the sense that I think we need to look at internal audit and external audit together here. So I'm sure when Javid talks about how the external audit plans have changed in light of COVID and other developments, he will elaborate on this a bit more. But financial resilience will be one of the key areas of focus for the external auditors. And I have to say that you know, I'm not sure that it would be appropriate for internal audit to be auditing our financial position at the current time. You know, internal audit, you know, tends to be focused on key controls, and you know, and that's why, you know, we cover, you know, all of our key financial systems as part of that rolling annual plan. I don't think the concern is about the controls per se. I think it's more about how we're managing the impact of the current circumstances that we find ourselves in, and the financial uncertainty that that gives rise to. And that will be a key area of focus for the external audit, and that will form part of this year's audit opinion. So so to address the second point that you're making about, there's no detail about costs. We have previously reported that the current service level agreement that we have with the City Council will provide the same level of audit coverage that we currently have at a reduced cost. So we're not writing a blank cheque. We have agreed a certain amount of audit days and a certain mix in terms of inputs to that, and the cost, is lower than what it was previously costing us to provide that service in-house, and those audits will be delivered to the same audit standards. So from a value for money perspective, I think we have covered off all of the key issues, that has been reported elsewhere. But if we don't have an audit plan that's agreed now, even if we accept that it's not set in stone and it will need to flex as we go through the coming months, then effectively we will be putting all internal audit activity on hold for the time being, because if we don't have a plan and we're not clear about what the auditors are supposed to be auditing, then it makes it impossible for them to make a start. So we need a plan of sorts, and as Claire has said, this is the best plan that we've got. A lot of the audit plan is covering just core audits that would need to be carried out during the course of the year. So on those key financial systems, there's the IT component. So, even if we were to come back with a revised plan a bit later, there'd be a substantial amount of the plan that was unchanged. I think the thing that might change is how we prioritise some of those audits in terms of which ones we do first. But I would be keen that we can agree something today that allows Claire and her team to get on and make a start. Otherwise, we're in danger of losing a quarter. If we don't have something until the next meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee, then that's June. So we won't have any audit activity starting until July at the earliest, which is not somewhere where I think we'd want to be. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, I think it's essential that we've got a starting point. We know that it may change, and it's inevitable, I think, in the current circumstances that it will change. But if we don't have a starting point, we can't do anything effectively. I think that's what you're saying. Did you want to make another comment on that, Mike, or are you happy with it?
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jan. I don't disagree with anything. I think my concern is, to the general public, that the only way they're going to hear about these things at the moment are meetings like this and documents that we publish. They're not going to get the normal feedback from councillors that they normally would, because it's incredibly difficult to get that information out. I'm more than happy for the plan to go forward, but I would ask that there's a line put in that says we start with our statutory responsibilities first. I don't want to stop us doing anything like that, but things that we might not need to do straight away, or things that might get waylaid because of the need to concentrate on certain areas, I think that needs to, now whether it's in minutes, it's fine. I don't want to stop us doing things. I don't want to stop us completely. And I thank you for the difference between internal and external. I'm not entirely sure that the internal audit shouldn't sometimes look at its own finances, if I'm honest, and I've done it at Stoke, so I know it's happened in the past. But at the same time, I take your point. But we need to, can I ask as well then, that as soon as we know a cost, and it might, and I know you're saying it's been reported elsewhere, where, can a member of the public go to that document and look at it? If they can, fine, we need to know what it is. But if they can't, then it needs to be in a document, whether it's the minutes of this meeting or whatever.
Okay.
Transparency is I suppose the key thing that I'm talking about here.
Mhm.
And cost and value for money is a huge thing, because going forward, regardless of party politics, we've got to be able to afford to do things going forward. And every penny we can save, we need to. So that's just things to bear in mind. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Sarah, I've still got your hand up. Are you wanting to ask something else or not? If you're not, then you just need to put your hand down. If you wouldn't mind. Same with you, Mike, I think. Are you down? Right, brilliant. No hands. Okay, so does anybody else have any questions in relation to this particular topic? Because obviously, on the understanding that we know that things are going to change, and we would expect the audits to be prioritised on those that are most important. But failing that, are we happy to approve items A and B and agree to item C? I'm not quite sure how we get the numbers. If anybody objects to that stance, if you put your hand up, then I'll know that you object. Otherwise, I'll take it that you agree.
Paul, can I abstain, please?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I've got no other hands. So Mike's abstaining, and I take it that everybody else agrees to these things. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to item number 5 then. Okay, the review of the scheme of delegation for local government, Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 and Town Police clauses. We've got a report on that. So I'm not sure what page number you're on there, because mine haven't got page numbers on them, but there's a report from Finance and Efficiency, Head of Environmental Health Services. Is that Nesta?
Yeah, Chair, would you
Yeah.
like me to give you an introduction on the report?
Please, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay then, Chair. This report comes to you because the members of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee in January requested a further review of the officer delegations, particularly in relation to granting taxi licences. So the report that you see proposes changes to the scheme of delegation, and they're outlined on pages 26. You can see there's 2 tables there, and there's one line that needs to, it's recommended is changed, and that's in relation to the power to grant, renew or transfer private hire and hackney carriages, vehicle licences, driver's licences and operators that are not in compliance with the policy. At present, that responsibility purely sits with Public Protection Committee or Public Protection Subcommittee, and it's recommended that it is extended to include or the Executive Director of Operational Services or Head of Environmental Health Service in agreement with the Chair and Vice Chair of Public Protection Committee. So section 4 of the report details the proposal and how in practice that will work. So what will happen is the officers will prepare a brief short report identifying the case and why it doesn't meet the current taxi policy for the Chair and Vice Chair to consider whether they will delegate that matter to officers or whether it should proceed to be dealt with by the Public Protection Subcommittee. So in order to make this change, this report has actually been considered by the Constitution and Member Support Working Group and also the Licensing and Public Protection Committee, both of whom were in support of the proposal. So you, members of this committee, are asked to also consider this. And should you be in agreement, then the report would progress on to the next meeting of Council, where then the approval to the scheme of delegation could actually happen. Happy to take any questions in relation to that, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Nesta. Does anybody have any questions in relation to this? If you put your hand up, obviously I'll come to you. Okay, I can't see any hands, so I'm assuming that everybody has happy to agree to this. So basically what we're doing is we're agreeing to support and recommend to the council the amendments that have been tabled. I'm assuming, unless I see a hand, I'll assume that everybody's in favour of this. Okay, right. No hands, so we can agree that then. Thanks, Nesta.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 6 then, we've got an update on the proposed changes to financial regulations. Now, that we've got that down as a verbal update. Jan, are you dealing with this for us?
I was going to take that, Chair. If
Dan, right, okay, thanks, Dan.
yes, members. So it's not a terribly long update. It's just to remind you that this committee on the 9th of March did approve some updates to the financial regulations. The detail of that is in the papers online from your 9th of March meeting. And before COVID-19 interrupted, we were expecting those to be adopted at full council on the 1st of April. So the verbal update I have for you now is twofold, basically. That's just to inform you that, of course, instead of the 1st of April meeting, they'll then need to be adopted at the next available meeting of full council, which we are anticipating will happen by the end of June. That's very much our hope. And then whilst I was revisiting the content of the updates, it occurred to me that there's lots of things in there that the Executive Director of Resources and Support Services is authorised to do. And it occurred to me that those are the sorts of things that you'd normally expect a Section 151 officer to be authorised to do. Now, of course, at the moment, our Section 151 officer and our Executive Director of Resource and Support Services are one and the same. But just to future-proof the drafting a little, because that's not necessarily always the case. You know, the 151 duties can be discharged by a different post. So just to future-proof the drafting a little bit, I was going to suggest to the committee, or ask if the committee would mind awfully, when I present that report to council, that I just change those references from Executive Director, Resource and Support Services to Section 151 Officer. Has absolutely no practical effect for the time being, because it's one and the same person. But if ever those two roles were severed, it means we wouldn't have to then go and update the paper again. So it's just taking advantage of the opportunity. The delay that we've got by COVID just gives us the opportunity to finesse the drafting a little and make it a little more accurate. So if members of the committee are in agreement, I think we can just reflect that in today's minutes, and that will suffice, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Dan. If anybody's got any issues with that, if you put your hand up, then I'll allow you to speak. If nobody puts their hands up, then I'll assume that everybody's in agreement and we'll agree to agree on it and move on. Okay, I'm showing no hands, so we'll take it that that's agreed. So if Jeff minutes that, and thanks very much, Dan, then we'll move on to the next item. Okay, the next item is urgent business, which was well, we've got no urgent business other than item 8 on the revised agenda. Now, if anybody is working off the original agenda, there is another item, and it's the update to the audit plan and the scoping letter, which I believe we've got Javid here, who is from the auditors, who's going to run through those with us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. Actually, at the last audit committee, we shared our audit plan with yourselves, including the scoping letter. And after that meeting, everything was approved, and then the world changed on the 23rd of March, and obviously, you know, we've sort of had to respond just like yourselves, you know, your in terms of, you know, how we're actually dealing with our work. This letter and sort of slight plan update is sort of sets out some of the key risks where things have changed. Fundamentally, obviously, our audit plan that we presented to the last audit committee is exactly the same as it is. Where obviously the world has changed is around obviously the introduction of home working, the fact that we can't do a lot of the sort of the face-to-face or looking at sort of original documentation. finances have changed. Obviously, COVID-19 has resulted in sort of significant additional costs for councils and the NHS. Going concern has become quite a big issue for local government. So our risks sort of that we're putting into the audit plan is being changed to reflect that. In terms of our work, obviously what we're going to have to do is sort of change our working practices, and obviously there's some core areas that we're going to need to focus around sort of when we come to do this year's annual audit, and that particularly is around financial resilience and financial sustainability and going concern. Those risks are sort of set out in the audit plan update and also in the scoping letter. In terms of our value for money, there's no change to our risk assessments for 2019-20, but financial sustainability is going to be key for 2020-21, and obviously we will pick that up as we're going through the audit. Earlier on, after we expected some changes, a significant change to the SIPFA code of practice in terms of we were expecting sort of a simplified approach coming through, but that hasn't happened. So in effect, the code hasn't changed. So we're still going to have to do pretty much a full set of accounts, although there will be some opportunity to sort of play to reduce disclosures. In terms of our fee impact, we're not proposing any changes to our fee. So the fee that was approved at the last audit committee in March, that will stay as it is at the moment. I'm not proposing to say any more, around sort of the two documents, because they're sort of both sort of saying the same thing. One's just a sort of slight format difference. I'm happy to sort of take any questions that the members may have.
Okay. Thanks, Javid. Yeah, just before I've got somebody who's waiting to ask a question. All I would say is obviously that we're in a very changing world at the moment, and it is obviously essential that the audit committee has kept, as far up to date as possible with anything that happens. And I've got Councillor Mike Stubbs who'd like to ask you something. Go on, Mike.
Thanks, Paul. Javid, just to pick you up slightly on what you just said, that you basically said that the value for money and the cost won't change. It doesn't quite say that in the letter. To quote the letter directly, it says, should circumstances change, we will let you know. It still leaves a door open to an increase in fees. Now, I fully accept that the committee made a decision the last time we met, but 3 members of that committee were very clear voting against this, and agreeing to this today would give you an opportunity to increase it for a third time, well, a third price change or a second increase, should you feel that it was necessary. Now, I find that really difficult purely on a value for money. Now, I understand that, and I have read your letter, that there will be a reduction in one area and probably an increase in another, and therefore it should be. But again, this plan and this proposed costing, not that there's a value, but this, what you're expecting to happen, could massively change tomorrow. And we keep making these leap of faith that nothing's going to change. Well, nothing was going to change the last time we voted on it, and it did. So I have real concerns that that as a committee, we should be locking the value for money completely. There shouldn't be an opportunity for, in our case, a supplier to change the cost again. Because the contract that we entered into right at the start was very clear that it was a set fee. I accept that the committee accepted the increase. It should not accept a third increase if that was what was to happen. I mean, could you come back on that for me? Thank you, Javid.
Just before you do, Javid, I think the situation would surely be that if you were to propose any increases, they'd have to go via the I forget the name of it, but there's a monitoring board that has to look at anything like that, any additional charges. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, that's what I was about to say. I think any fee increases have to go through PSAA, so that, you know, so before they're approved. So initially, they obviously we'd set out, as we did in our letter back to the committee in March, and then those fee proposals would then go back to PSSA, and they would then approve those. And obviously, in terms of, this isn't something that's happened specifically for Newcastle under Lyme Council. This is something that's happened across the board in the world of audit. So, you know, and I think at the last audit committee, Andy Smith, the engagement lead, actually sort of presented to yourselves a sort of a detailed sort of review of what had been happening and the various reviews that are taking place around the world of audit, why we were sort of increasing the fees and why we were requesting the fee variations. You know, it's not simply a case of, actually, we think we would like some more money. It is about some very specific things that have happened within the audit sector that have resulted in additional work, and that's what we requested a fee variation for.
Does that answer your question, Mike?
To be honest, Sharon, I think at the risk of reopening the last meeting, which obviously we don't want to do, it doesn't answer my question, to be honest, because it just allows people to break contracts. And I don't agree with that. But the committee made a decision, so that's fine. And actually, Javi, thank you for sort of reinforcing the fact that this just won't be decided by yourselves. It'll have to go through a process, and I'm sure that process will be reported to us as well. So thank you.
Okay. I've got Stephen who wants. Steve, do you want to come in?
On mute. Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah. John, at the last meeting, certain members voted against the £7,500. If that had been carried, what would have happened?
Well, that was made clear at the meeting, Steve, that essentially we'd have been in dispute with the auditors.
Yeah, and then what happens?
Well, then you'd have to then potentially find new auditors.
And would the new auditors be cheaper?
Sorry, if for example you chose to go into dispute with Grant Thornton as your external auditors, the first thing that would happen, it would be referred back to PSAA. They would, and you'd have the opportunity to present your argument as to your case, and they would then say, oh, okay, you know, they would then make a decision as to whether they would give you a change of auditors or whether there was a sort of a renegotiation on some part.
Thanks,
Right.
Javid. I've got two people at the moment with their hands up. One's Jan and one's Sarah. Sarah, do you want to go first?
It's not really about fees, this one. I was just reading the first paragraph. How realistic do you think it is that you're going to hit the deadlines this year to get the accounts closed, given what's going on? Probably a question maybe for Sarah or for Jan on that one. Because if we run over, do we get any penalties, or does it include any extra audit work for us?
Jan, do you want to come in on that, and then if we need to, we can ask Javid about it.
Yeah. So the timetable has been extended both for completing the accounts, and the public inspection of the accounts is a key date within that. And then for completion of the audit and the issue of the audit certificate. So as things stand, the finance team is still working to the original timetable for production of the draft accounts. We have not yet agreed a final timetable for the external auditors to come in and do their work on those draft accounts. But there's no reason to believe that we won't comfortably meet the end of September deadline. In fact, I think it's been extended further than that now, hasn't it? Is it end of October? So I personally don't have any concerns about that, but it is subject to external audit resource availability, and that's the thing that you know, we haven't completely tied down yet. But from the point of view of our internal resourcing, you know, we're confident we'll meet the timetable, and we don't have all of the complex issues that we were dealing with last year. So it should be a more straightforward audit process this year. And we have also implemented a new asset management system, which should greatly reduce the amount of work required to produce the property, plant and equipment working papers. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable at the moment. I don't know if Sarah wants to add anything to that.
Just same really. Obviously we are still working to the original timetable. If anything, we might kind of slip a couple of weeks and go into mid kind of June, obviously due to COVID-19 additional work that we've been doing, looking at the finances. But all the finance team members are still working on getting the accounts closed down as soon as we can, so that obviously it gives Grant Thornton a bit longer to audit them, depending on however your resources are panning out there, Javid. So
yeah, I mean, I would have thought from a practical point of view, the biggest issue would be getting the internal auditors in, because actually doing the accounts is probably easier at home when you haven't got the interruptions of the office than it would be at work. Of course, I don't know how many interruptions you've got at home.
You.
Few.
Oh, two.
Jay, can I?
The man who's got no kids at home.
Yeah, go on, Jan.
Jay, can I just add on the point specifically about the fees? So, just to be clear, we've just had a letter. In fact, I think Jay, you've received a copy of the letter as well from the PSAA confirming the scale fees. Same as this year, same as last year, and the additional items have been agreed nationally. So they're all things which all auditors across all councils will be looking at this year, and there are standard uplifts to the scale fees to reflect that work. The one variable element would be if there are local factors which require additional work by Grant Thornton. So we touched on this earlier about financial resilience. If the council were to get into significant financial difficulties and it were necessary for me to issue a section 114 notice at some point, and I should stress I have no immediate plans to do that, but we will be keeping the situation under review. And if at any point it does become necessary for such a notice to be issued, then clearly that would then result in a requirement for the external auditors to take certain formal actions and undertake additional work over and above, the work that they're going to do to look at our financial resilience more generally. So that might be an example of a scenario where Grant Thornton might well come back and say, well, we are going to put in a fee variation now. In that circumstance, it would have to be agreed by the PSAA, and we would be given an opportunity to tell the PSAA whether we were going to accept that fee increase or not. And it would then go to them for adjudication if we couldn't reach agreement. Other than purely local circumstances, the audit fees are now set, and they've been set on a consistent basis nationally across all of the councils that contract their external audit services via the PSAA. And that is one of the advantages of us procuring external audit through PSAA, that these issues are dealt with on a standardised basis across all councils, rather than every council having to have its own individual negotiation with its auditors and not having visibility of what's happening elsewhere. So I hope that provides some comfort that, we're not open to the risk that, Grant Thornton might willy-nilly start to charge us for things that, we're not prepared to pay for.
Okay, thanks, Jan. Does anybody else have any other questions in relation to it? At the moment, I've got Jeff Durham, who has his hand up, and Sarah Pickup with the hand up.
Thank you, Chair.
Wish to speak? Sorry,
yes.
go on, Jeff.
Sorry, Chair. For the purpose of the minutes and anybody watching, could you please explain why the last item was an urgent item, please?
Why it was an urgent item?
Why it was considered urgent, yes, yeah.
It was something that came through to me, Jeff. It was. I think Jan's probably better at explaining this than I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, so Chair, I think we propose that we bring this as an urgent item to this meeting of the committee, and you agreed because it is a an update that reflects the current circumstances, and also it's important that the committee are comfortable with the scope of the external audit work. Excuse me. So I've been talking too much and I'm losing my voice. I think it's important that the committee have the opportunity to be informed about the proposed changes to the scope and the focus of the external audit well in advance of the next meeting in June, because if you did have issues with that, we need to know about them now. So that was why we proposed bringing it to this meeting. And of course, we only received that letter earlier this week, so there wasn't an opportunity to add it to the agenda as a in the normal way as a standard item of business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, one other thing, I had a note from Barry Panther to say he was struggling with technology, so if you could add his name to the apologies, if you wouldn't mind.
Already done, Chair.
You've done it already.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. Does anybody else have any other questions they'd like to ask? At the moment, I've got Sarah Pickup with the hand up. Sarah, did you want to say anything?
I wasn't going to, but seeing as my hand's still up, I just wonder how much notice would they give us? I'm just looking at the line that says, should circumstances change, we will let you know. How much sort of notice would we be given by the auditors if it was a significant difference to that fee? Because I agree with Mike, it does to me leave it a little bit, leaves us a little bit open, I think, as it's worded there, because to say we will do our best to work within this envelope doesn't actually mean they are going to stick to that fee, does it?
I think just on the basis of that, Sarah, I would expect them to tell us before they even did any work. So if a situation like that was arising, I mean, obviously Jan or Javid can give us a bit more information, but I would expect us to know before it even happens. Jan, have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, yes, Chair. I mean, if there was going to be any sort of significant variation, because as a result, for whatever reason, where we're going to have to do significant additional work, which would result in a fee variation, then we would immediately flag that up with your Section 151 officer and start those discussions. So it would not be a case of we do the work and then we go, you owe us this money. It is, we identify the risk, we have the negotiation with Jan, and we then notify, immediately we would be sort of, the audit committee would be aware, of the facts, and then there'd be, they'd be approving the process, before we started getting into doing any, actual work.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Javid. Jeff, did you want to say something else? Jeff, I've got your hand
sorry.
up.
Sorry, Chair. No, I'll take my hand down.
No, right. Right, Sarah, you wanted to come back on that?
Yeah, we were in this situation last year because we ended up with an extra audit fee last year, didn't we?
Yeah.
For various reasons, which I'm not going to go into again because we did discuss it. But were the audit committee actually made aware of that before it actually happened? I don't recall us being told that the auditors were going to do extra work until they'd actually done it last time, unless I've missed something.
Yeah. From my recollection, I'm fairly certain we were told. I don't think we were given any figures on it, but I think we were told that the costs were going to vary because of the extra work. I think fairly early on in the audit, we'd been advised that there were certain areas that required more work. But I mean, obviously, there was a number of areas that they looked at. And whilst we weren't given any figures, I'm pretty certain that we were advised that there would be potential additional costs in relation to it. I think in the light of the way it went last year and what might happen this year, I think we'd probably want a very good estimate of what it might cost in advance. Although I would question that we could do anything about it. We might not be able to prevent it, but at least we could ask in advance. So are you happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you say, I think there's very little we could do about it in the event, because if they've got to do the extra work, then the only person that really can do the negotiation on that is Jan, isn't it, really? Because you'd be the one that would be arguing back against it. But I think we should be told, certainly as a committee, we need to be told as soon as absolutely possible what the implications are and what the costs are, particularly given the current situation and the fact that, you know, we might have an unbalanced budget this year, or well, there will be a cost for this year, won't it? It won't be, you won't have accrued for it in last year, will you? So I think it's very, very important that the audit committee are kept aware, even if it's just, you know, an email from you, Paul, as the chair, just to let the committee members know in advance.
I mean, that's fair comment, and I obviously, if any situations arise, then we'll make sure that the audit committee is kept fully abreast of it. Mike, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks. I fully take Jan's point that circumstances may dictate that that Grant wouldn't have to do additional work, and that's fine. But correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of the some of the costs, the additional costs last year, weren't actually due to mistakes within the council. It was that things had changed nationally, guidelines had changed nationally. My big concern is that come the revolution and there's some sort of audit nationally about how local governments, how everybody dealt with the crisis, that there'll be additional audit responsibilities placed on us. And like Sarah has said, we had no way of seeing this. There'll be nothing in the budget for it, and it won't be, you know, and there won't be a handout from central government. Now we're already seeing how slow they are at coming forward for just to keep the councils running. But when we get to audits, and it's not sexy, and it's not going to be on the front page of papers, it's still a significant cost to the council, and a time, one suspects, where we are not going to be able to afford unbudgeted items. So whilst I take what Jan said, that, you know, if it's something that we've had to do, and that's absolutely fine, and if it's a mistake that we've made, that's absolutely fine. But we also have to take into account that there probably will, and I'd be stunned if there aren't extra audit responsibilities placed on us at the end of this crisis, one for a better word, because people want to know that the response was right, and part of that will be how local government responded. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work, and obviously we don't have a crystal ball, but I think the important thing is that we're kept abreast of any work that is going to be undertaken, and we're also informed in some detail of any potential additional costs, and I think that's probably as good as we can make it. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's all sorts of possibilities, but you know, as long as we're made aware of everything and everything's clear and transparent, that as an audit committee is probably as close as we can get, isn't it? I haven't got anybody else who's got the hand up, so I'm assuming that everybody's said what they want to say. That was the final item on the agenda. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance at the meeting. It went reasonably well, considering. And I'll look forward to speaking to you at the next meeting. So thanks very much.